Robert. And hi, Lynn. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too. We've been virtual friends for a while, and here we
I,
are.
I know. I have to tell you, I'm having a little background envy at the moment because your background looks so serene with your books out. I am in my husband's study because it's the closest to the Wi-Fi, and I didn't want to have any trouble. And he's a theater director, so these are all his posters in the background. Now, somewhere in
I
my
love
books,
it.
somewhere in this little house, our books are here. But more importantly, congratulations on your book, Dark
Well,
Rivers to
congratulations on
Cross.
yours.
Thank you, thank you. And look, I have my trusted T-shirt on, book club. So I thought we would just start by telling people what our books are about, and I would really love to hear you talk about yours because it's fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think that's a wonderful place to start. I've read all of your books. I've been a fan for a while, so I couldn't wait when
Thank you.
Last Affair came out. So Dark Rivers to Cross is a psychological suspense story, and it starts with no big surprise. It's right in the very beginning, a mother on the run, and she's, of course, keeping why she's on the run from her two adult sons. They live in the rugged wilderness of northern Maine, and it turns out that both of them have a sense that she's been keeping something from them because she's always been quite distant and remote. But one of them is comfortable with that, and one of them is not. And that begins the quest for trying to discover and uncover whether or not this is a secret to be known or a secret to remain hidden.
That's a great way to describe it. And also what I found so compelling about it is the more the Jonah in particular wants to know, the more you, the reader, wants to know. And you handle it so skillfully because you open with, I believe it's in the second person, this really haunting, captivating voice of this woman who's in danger and being watched and afraid for her life. And then it switches in time and in place. And then you give us little snippets throughout of the past. And I love books like that that are a puzzle piece. And so the reader is a participant in the mystery, trying to piece things together. When you get a little piece from the past, then you move to the present. And like I said, as Jonah is determined to figure things out, so is the reader. You did a fantastic job with it. So
Thank you.
Commend you. Yeah. Well, I mostly want to talk about your book, so I'll just say a snippet about mine. But Her Last Affair is, I don't really think of myself as a thriller writer, although I'm honored to be included in that category. Just think of myself as a storyteller, and it's really the story of this woman, Skyla Hull, who ran a drive-in movie theater with her husband. You can see it right there, the old drive-in movie theater, and it's now defunct, and she lives in the shadow of the tattered screen. And a few nights before their 50th wedding anniversary, her husband dies in a freak accident behind the drive-in out in the woods. And so she takes in a very charming stranger named Teddy Cornwall. And then it tells three seemingly separate stories of three seemingly separate people, and their lives halfway through the book collide. And it, similar to your book, it's what I wanted was the reader to be a participant in the puzzle of it and try to figure out how are these worlds connected. In your case, it's the past and the present and the secrets. And mine, it is past and present, but it's the 3 points of view as well that seem very, very separate. So that's what Her Last Affair is about.
Yeah.
How long does it take? What's that?
I was just going to say, one of the things that I loved about your book, and it reminded me of what I tried to do too, was you used the movie quotes to sort of set a backdrop for where we're going to go and what we, sort of foreshadowing what we might experience. And I tried to do that with the river terms. And it's just a fun structure to be playing around with these dropping little references that we hope the reader will see as some kind of foreshadowing.
Yes, it definitely worked with yours because I would get to them between each one and I just had this feeling of, uh-oh. Oh no, there's trouble coming. A friend of mine whom you might know, the wonderful writer Chris Bojalian, who people tuning in, I'm sure have read his books as well. He always talks about this, how important the sense of dread is in his books. And that's how I felt when I would get to those sections in your book, Lynn. It just gave me such a sense of, like I said, an uh-oh feeling of like, oh no, I feel something dangerous and captivating and bad is going to happen. And it just helps build the tension. And for me, with the film quotes, it's, as I said, it's structured with three seemingly different points of view and narratives and characters. And I thought, I need to do something to tell the reader, to signal to the reader, this is all part of one thing. So I had the idea to include film quotes that open each chapter, and the quotes, that way the quotes, it's kind of my way to say to the reader, trust me, this is all part of one thing. And also the quotes, same as yours, they act as clues as to what's to come. And so it was really fun to do that. I agree. So my question, I have a bunch of questions. I'm going to just say a few of them at once. One is, I want to know how you came, did you always want to write? Because your bio says you're a longtime family counselor, which I thought was really interesting, especially given the topic of your book. Two, I want to know how long it takes you to write a book like this, because I take forever. So those are my first two. But tell me about your journey from family counseling to being a novelist.
So I've always been a storyteller. I feel like I've always been a kid who read and who acted, and I played with dolls far longer than I should have, but it was all about the story for me. And then I was directed to go a sort of traditional path with my education. And so I followed along, and I had wanted to go to school for theater, but I followed along and took that traditional, go to college, get a degree.
I can talk to Thomas. We can cast you. Yeah. We can cast you.
Yay. So I went the traditional route. I became a counselor, and I really enjoy my work. It's also storytelling. People speak in narratives. People want to understand the story they're telling themselves. But I felt like that creative pursuit was really lacking. It was something that felt missing in my life. And so I turned to writing fiction. And from there, I've just felt like it's exactly the right blend of the way I see the world, which is, I understand those family dynamics from a research and practical application point of view, but I want to look at them in my fiction as, situations that don't have clear-cut answers. They present themselves, and the characters have to figure that out. So some counselor like me doesn't have the right answer. The characters have the right answer. And that's the journey they go on to figure it out.
And do you ever use, I think about this with the writer Amy Bloom, who I don't think she counsels anymore. I'm getting over a little, I had COVID sadly, so I have a little cough once in a while, so forgive me. But she doesn't counsel anymore, I believe, but she was a counselor for years. And I always wonder if she puts, I know as a therapist, you're not really supposed to use things, but do you? Or how does that impact with the, because you create such compelling characters, and it begs the question, are these pure figments of your imagination? Would you admit if they were some bits and pieces of people? I don't know.
I will totally admit that they are not. So here's how so here's how I do it, though. The way that I do it is, I imagine the physicality of the characters separate of anyone that I know, but I look at the themes that present themselves. It's really interesting when you're a counselor, how often you hear stories where the themes are nearly identical to what you've heard before. It's just that the details are slightly different. So what I do is I listen for those sort of thematic issues. What happens when a mother is holding a secret and she doesn't ever think she can tell her children? I have a lot of people who tell me they're holding secrets. And so what does that do to their relationships, and how distant do they become, and when do they ever decide they can reveal those things? So that's what takes on its own life in my work.
Got it. That makes sense. The theme that brings through the character from there. And then how long does it take you to I'm always fascinated by people's work habits and how their books come to them, what the genesis is, and then what their work habits are, and the trajectory and the time from start to finish.
Right. I would say that every single one of my novels has taken a different period of time, and I wish it were more predictable, because then I think I could work with that predictability and say, okay, it takes me this long, so I have to look at my calendar, look at my life, and organize it around that. But each of my novels has taken a really different amount of time. And interestingly enough, Dark Rivers to Cross took the longest. I had it I had it in my mind that I wanted the whole novel to feel like a turbulent river. so that while Lena's going down one way, the boys are going down a different way, and there are obstacles in their path. And so
That's
because
how
of
it feels.
good, because that's what I wanted, and that was hard to do, really hard to do.
So does that mean hard to do a lot of trial and error, or
Yeah,
cutting and throwing things away and starting over? And
a lot of
did you
cutting,
work,
a lot of
do
rearranging.
you work alone doing that, or do you have a trusted reader? Or
I have trusted readers, but not until I get to a certain point.
got it.
I need to make sure that when I'm going to be giving it to a trusted reader, I already have some sense of what I need them to inform
That
me
makes
about.
sense.
Like, I
That
never
makes
give
sense.
it to somebody and then say, throw it all at me, because I don't know whether it's because I'm too sensitive, I can't take it.
I know, it is scary. It's such a, people think even if you've, because you've written previous books, that you don't still have that sensitive moment of like when you're showing something someone new, and it's really kind of tender and it makes you so nervous. And so I understand that. You know what's funny about the writing process? I always say, when I met Thomas, we've been together 26 years. We were young, and I would get up in the night and write from 3 to 5 sometimes, and then he would stay off. And I don't know when you write these books, like I never see you write. Now I joke, we're a little older now. I joke, come quick, I wrote a paragraph. Hurry, come read it. I call to him.
Well, you've now decided
but
he's a trusted
really
reader.
my first trusted reader.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. He is. He is. So did Lena come to you first, or Luke, or Sprout? Well, I suspect Lena, but how did it come to you?
Yeah, so Lena came to me first. I imagined that she would have endured something very traumatic, and that it would really require her to make enormous sacrifices for her children. And then the boy that came to me first was Luke.
Okay.
So both of the boys, Luke and Jonah, are adults now, but we do get to see them as children, and we do get to see them growing. We see the consequences of the secret being held from them at lots of different ages.
Yes.
That was really fun to consider. Because obviously a little child is going to sense something's wrong, but not really be able to put it into words. And older children are going to start to rebel against whatever that distance is, right?
Like it's what Jonah, that's what he does.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so I really had a lot of, it was very satisfying to be able to imagine how each of these boys would experience this so very different, and that even as adults, they would still feel like there was something missing.
Yeah. Well, you portray that so well, because it's really about inherited trauma. I mean, you're the counselor. I shouldn't tell you. You can tell me. But I, having read some about inherited trauma, that was on my mind as I was turning the pages. And was that I assume that was your intention, but you tell me.
Yes. So it was my intention, because I wanted to explore the whole nature nurture conversation, which is how much of who we are is based on what we are given biologically, and what is as a result of the way we live and the environment we experience life in. And again, this rugged wilderness.
It's a fascinating ongoing question.
Right. And it affects both of them in different ways, living so remotely, so off the grid, right? And so even if we don't have any sense of what's in our backstory as human beings, it's still operating. And I really wanted to examine what that would feel like.
And did your thoughts on it change having written the book and then these characters?
I think it made me a little bit more sensitive. I don't think it maybe changed what I think, because there's so much research on this now. But I think it made me more compassionate for what it feels like to know that there's something hidden from you, or something that you feel is not quite right, but you can't ever really put your finger on it.
Yeah, it must. What an awful feeling. Thomas and I just watched a documentary on Netflix. I think it was on Netflix. Three Identical Strangers. Did you watch this? About those three twins who were all separated and given up for adoption, and they found each other, and it's all about the inherited trauma of their lives. And crazy things that happened to them. I don't know. It was really interesting. So I thought I was reading your book and we watched that one night. So I had that topic on my mind quite a bit. But so how do you approach for you writing about such hefty topics, but also doing it in an entertaining way? Because you're trying to explore something that's a heavy theme, but you're also trying to engage a reader, which you do so well, captivate them and entertain them. So sometimes people say to me, "Oh, you're so lighthearted. You should write something funny." And like my books are, I have what I think are darkly humorous moments in them, but I wouldn't call them comedies by any stretch. But so what about you in terms of that question, writing something entertaining, but also exploring a heavy topic?
Well, the way that I kind of approach it is I do a lot of research on the thing I'm trying to examine, and I do that before I start writing. And then once I start writing, I don't actually look at that ever again. It's just I'm hoping I've internalized whatever I've internalized, and then because I don't want it to come in so contrived. I don't want it to be like, oh, and now you're going to hear about what it feels like to struggle with being adopted, or like I don't that's not my intention. So once I finish the research, I park it and I don't go back to it. I just hope I can embody it in the emotional experience of the characters. But as far as the entertaining part of it, people would describe me, my friends and family would describe me as sort of an optimist and a sunny kind of person, and yet I write these rather dark emotional tales because I want to go there to explore it, but then I want to leave it there, and then kind of go live my life as the person who did it over here but doesn't need to do it every day.
And do you ever give it to someone and they're like who this, like I have a friend who jokes Murder, She Wrote is too dark for her, or no, as dark as she can go. That's as dark as she can go, Murder, She Wrote. So with my book, she always says she reads the ending first because she's like the tension kills her. And I get so annoyed with her. I'm like, you can't do that. The whole point is the tension. But do you have anybody in your life who bristles against the suspense and tension because you do it so wonderfully, or everyone in your life just gobbles it up?
No, I definitely have people that say that, wow, I can't believe that you write these things.
Yeah.
But my family is super supportive of what I do. I do have some friends that probably won't ever go to this place because again, it's not their comfort zone. But I'll give you a little bit of a reframing on your friend who reads your ending first. She's actually trying to cope with it. So she reads the ending so she can feel safe and secure, and then she goes back and can experience it. So that's actually not so bad.
And not so bad. Okay. I'll tell her that a licensed family counselor said so. Because I always tell her, please don't do that. Please don't do that. But do you think books are meant to be an escape or your books in particular are meant to be an escape from the reader's world and life where you want them to just lose themselves? Or do you want them to be thinking back about issues? And
I think I want them to do both, which I know is a bit of a tall order. Or maybe I want them to have a choice. So if you want to escape, I think you can read my work as genre fiction, domestic suspense. I think you can read it on that level. If you want to kind of dig into the types of family life issues that we don't feel that comfortable talking about, and therefore they can wreak havoc in our relationships, you can read it on that level. And if you enjoy reading it on both levels, all the better, right? But I really want people at the end of the day to feel like they examined something and they're at least considering something in a new way or in a different way. That would be good for me. I would feel satisfied with that.
If it entertained them, but then it also kind of found it thought-provoking. Well, that worked for me. So I asked you about the topics, but I wanted to also ask you about the setting, because the setting is so specific and so vibrant and just brings it alive, because it's set at an inn up in these woods, and there's mountains and trails and hiking and water, rivers, obviously. I know you said you live on the Cape, but have you spent time up in the north and Maine and that area? And Tell me about the setting, how you painted such a vivid picture.
Well, you would think that I'm quite an athletic person, which is really not the case. If you see all the trails that all the characters go on and all the hiking and everything, but I certainly love to vicariously experience it. My family does spend time in Maine. We live in Massachusetts, and we're not that far. So we've spent time in the region. It's absolutely breathtaking. It's the Maine woods that Thoreau wrote about. It's really extraordinary. And I knew that I wanted to set this particular story that looks at nature and nurture in an environment that would test the characters. And this just turned out to be the perfect spot. It's just extraordinarily beautiful up there.
Yeah. So you weren't YouTubing like rafting at trips and you actually spent time there. So you were drawing a memory. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, it shows, Lynne. It really, really shows, because it just feels so vivid and so compelling, and the dynamics feel great. And then there's a character we haven't talked about, Coop, and I found him, especially in the scene. I don't want to give things away, but when Lena first arrives at the cabin in the past, and I hope you don't mind me giving a little bit away.
Not at all.
And
not at all.
he's so sweet to her, and it's very, very heartening just how he treats her, and especially given the moment she's in her lives. People have to read it to find out what that moment is. But is he just made up whole cloth, or did you pull him from places? Because there's a real, you sense when you first meet him a real tenderness.
Right. Yeah, he is completely fabricated character. And what I wanted there was for the reader to sense that they could trust him, and for Lena to not know if she could. I wanted him to be so identifiable to the reader as someone who is kind and good. But since she doesn't know kind and good, how would she be able to make that decision? Right.
I
So
know.
it takes her a while to warm up to him. And the reader I'm hoping the reader, like you, is confident that he is good.
Yeah.
But we see that she can't know that.
Well, you capture her wariness so well, and it feels understandable to the reader. But what you want for her, or my experience, what I wanted for her was, you're thinking, you can trust him, it's okay, as you read it. And there seems a real sweetness and tenderness about him. And then especially because you're getting glimpses from the present, in the present of their life. What was the hardest part of the book to write for you, would you say? Because there's lots of points of view, or lots of time shifts and moments and suspense. And so I don't know, I was wondering when I wrote it, like, was the time shifting the hard part? Was the suspense the hard part? Was it the characters? Because every book I find that I write has its own struggles, and some things come easier and some things don't. So did you have an element for you that was one part that was the most challenging, or conversely, in contrast, something that came really easily about it?
Right. I would say for sure the structure was the hard part, because as I said, I really got it in my mind that I was trying to create that river, which meant I had to know when to flip back into the past, when to go back into the present. And when I got into the present, who had the point of view? Was it Lena or Luke? And so that became complicated for me. And I pulled it apart a bunch of different times and put it back together in different ways to achieve that sense of tension, to get that feeling. And there are even section in the book where I'm hoping the reader feels like they're in some flat water and they're in an eddy and they get a minute to breathe a little bit. That, the river isn't always turbulent. There are times where it's calm and it gives people a sense of serenity. And so I was trying to create that too. So the structure was for sure the trick of it all. When to reveal what. Is Lena young, old, in between? Like where is she in her life? That was all tricky.
See, I would imagine it would be. Well, you pulled it off beautifully, so kudos to you. But when you say you pulled it apart, for me, like this book, many books I've written, I need to print them out, lay them all on the floor, rearrange things, move them around, read them out loud. Is that what pulling apart looks like for you? Because I'm always curious about other writers' work habits. Is that when you say pulling it apart, is it
Yes.
just cutting and pasting on a laptop, or it's printing up and physically seeing it?
Yeah, no, it's physically printing it and moving it around. I also had like on my wall, I would had scenes, and I would say, what if I moved this one over here? And then I would see that it didn't look right. And then what if I moved this back? So I did it both the physical pages at one point, and I did it by scenes at one point. I always knew that the most dangerous scenes, there are two dangerous scenes, that I would write those from the second point of view, from the second, right? Because I wanted to create a distance, and I didn't want to be gratuitous about what she experienced. I didn't feel the need to sensationalize anything, but also I know the reader would have said, why don't we get to know it?
Yeah, it's
Right.
funny because it both, to me, the second person point of view, which is the you voice, to you know, it created a distance certainly, but it also created a real immediacy, because it's like you're reaching out from the pages saying you, and so it's just very very captivating, especially in moments of this is some pretty tense, scary moments when you use that voice. So it really
Right.
works incredibly well. You did a
Yeah,
good
and
job.
it's really, again, that's really tricky, because writers are often told not to use that point of view. So it you get conflicting advice sometimes, even in your own writer community.
Yeah.
And
Well, there's so many good books like Bright Lights Big City, or like Lori Moore, certain stories of hers, or certain books written that way, and people just can pull it off. And then it depends, I think if the whole book was second person, it wouldn't work for this book,
I
but you
agree.
use it at the exact right moments when you chose to employ that voice. It just worked so well. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Well,
really, I agree with you. I think if the whole book were that, it wouldn't have worked at almost at all. But the two times that it works, I think the reader is it's signaling to the reader, this is why she's done everything. These moments almost allow you to imagine that this is what's driven all of her decision making, good, bad, and
yeah,
otherwise.
you really get it too. It sinks in. People who are joining us, all the participants and people here, you're in for a treat with this book. It is captivating, dark, compelling, great characters, a wonderful, lush, atmospheric setting, a beautiful title too. How do you think of your titles, Lynne? Because I love The Dangers of an Ordinary Night, and now you have Dark Rivers to Cross, two great titles. How do you come up with them?
The Dangers of an Ordinary Night was the one and only. That one came to me when I was reading an article in the Atlantic about how we can just be kind of in our own world, walking through life, and suddenly we have no idea the dangers that are hiding, like in an ordinary night. Like we're just
Yeah,
going on minding our own business, right?
it's
So
something happened.
when I read that in the Atlantic, I was like, whoa, I love that concept, right? That not only that we have never know when our lives will turn into something different. So that what for me was a one and done.
Yeah,
Dark Rivers to Cross was harder. I wanted it to feel like it was embodying the kind of work that I want to do. And I wanted it to be, it's literal. They definitely have to cross a dark river, but I wanted it to be metaphoric, because there are characters that are dark that they have to cross, and there are consequences to doing so.
yeah.
So that one took a
Well,
little bit longer.
both are very evocative, so really good. Now, I'm told about now I'm supposed to turn questions over, and we actually have a question that's been from Richard Gautel. I think I'm saying his name right. He asks, and everyone joining us, please send your questions in, because Lynne is here to answer them. I'm here to answer questions. Richard asks, is there a character who is a counselor in the book? And if not, why not?
Well, I have had counselors in previous books, but I don't always want to come at my stories from that same angle. It's interesting to me to come at them from the angles of an ordinary person who has a job that, Lena runs Church's Overlook, which is a resort in the woods. and a very rustic place. And she's got a busy life. She's got to keep moving. She's got stuff to do, right? And yet she's still holding these secrets. So I don't always want to come at things from the point of view of someone who knows about some of these issues. But at the same time, with other books, I have been comfortable with taking that angle.
Yeah, I think sometimes, well, this is a bias because my wonderful mentor and professor in graduate school at NYU, the novelist Anne Hood, she sometimes would say that's tricky to pull off therapy, ongoing therapy scenes in books. Or I remember saying something like that. I don't know. I'm not quoting her exactly, but I find that some books it really, really works. And like Wally Lamb wrote a book with a therapist in many, many scenes, and it was so compelling and captivating. And then other times it feels a little just stiff because it's two people sitting in a room, and it doesn't, it's hard to make captivating. I mean, I guess you can flash back or pull away from it and show what they're talking about. But did you find that when you have included therapy scenes in books, is that part of what your thinking is?
Yes, I think it has to be an active exchange. It can't be passive. You know, one of the dangers of any kind of writing is when people are just like sitting around or eating or walking or driving, right? So in the therapy experience, it has to be active. There has to be conflict. There has to be something at stake. And so I think it doesn't work when it just feels like sort of a back and forth that's passive. The Wally Lamb book, are you thinking about? I know this much is true.
This much is true. Yeah, he does such a
Because
great job.
and it's so active. Like everything
It's
that's
active.
happening in there, there's so much raw emotion. There's so much anger between the character and the therapist, and the therapist is so skillful. Like, you know that she knows what she's doing. So it's very active in that book, and I think that's why it works.
Yeah, and I think Prince of Tides, which I only saw the movie, I never read the book. I don't know if it works because I've only seen the movie with Barbara Streisand.
Yes.
But okay. So we have another question from Peggy Gale. She asks, if you're still working as a family counselor, how and when do you find the time to write? Is there a particular time of day that works best for you? Because Robert said at the opening that I'm editor-at-large of Cosmo, and I'm actually not at Cosmo after 23 years of editing that magazine. I'm no longer there. Happily writing my books full time, but I remember the tricky part was finding the time to write. And that a magazine editor job was a big, demanding job, but it was tricky. And so I imagine the same being a counselor. So how do you find the time?
I definitely do it by the whole, sticking to the schedule. So even if I'm working on a novel and I'm not going to be able to get any pages done because I've got, a lot of clients, or I'm doing a lot of public speaking, or I'm traveling, I'll still sit with the novel for at least a little bit of time every day, because I don't want the experience of being so far away from it that then it takes me a really long time to get back into it. Because it would not only change the energy of the story, but I think it would just make it harder to be consistent too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, even I make a little list of things that I'll do, like even if I'm going to read a couple of pages today and take notes, or I'm going to do a character sketch on this person today, or I'm just going to write a bunch of dialogue that I might use, or just so that even if I'm lacking for time, I'm still connected to it.
Just to keep yourself in it. But do you find sometimes that being away from it is good because you see it fresh? Or when you're working a book, do you never take a break? Like, do you keep at it till it's done? Like, do you ever put it away for a week just to kind of have a fresh look, or no?
I do, but that's usually when I have a draft, right? When that first draft stage where the middle and the end are way out in front of me, I touch it every day. But once I've got a draft, I will take some space from it so that I can be honest with myself about things that aren't working, right?
Yeah, yeah. And what's your relationship with your editor like? You turn it in and then you bite your nails waiting to hear back from him or her.
Yes.
And
a lot of nail biting.
Yeah. And then, but I imagine the books come out great, so I imagine it's a great relationship. Have you had the same editor?
I have for the last two, and it's been really such a gift. And I do feel worried. And then when it comes back, I don't know about you, but whenever I get the feedback, the very first thing I do is scan it to find out the gestalt of how much work it is.
Exactly. Yeah,
And then
exactly.
I'll go, okay,
I can
okay,
do
I
this.
can
Yeah.
do this.
I know. I have to say with Her Last Affair was the book where I have a wonderful excuse me, editor, and we really went back and forth on the ending more so than other books. And it took me a while to really get her comment. And finally, I kept going back and forth. And finally, she said just the most basic sentence. And she said about this last part, this actually, particularly like one or two scenes toward the end of the book, she said, "I just don't believe these people would act this way." And I thought it was then it's so clarified for me in my mind. Oh, she's right. That's what she means. So do you find that with your editor, sometimes they say one phrase that crystallizes what they're
Yes,
trying to get at for you?
yes. And I often don't need editorial. I often don't need someone to tell me how to fix it. I just need them to tell me what's wrong. Right?
Yeah.
Because I might have a lot of different ways that I could fix it or address it. But I just actually need to know what their perception of what isn't working is. And
And
then
then you can
I can come up with
start.
whatever, right? That'll
Yeah.
jog my mind.
Yeah.
So
Um,
I like that candor. Like this isn't working for X, Y, and Z reasons. You just have to
yeah.
hear that part, right?
Yeah, and then you got it. Robert, don't worry. He says, my apologies for not having an updated bio. That is 100% fine. I just was kind of pointing that out. But and then Robert was asking, or someone's asking here, if readers enjoyed your first book, do you think they'll enjoy this one? And are there any similarities?
So I do think that of all of my novels, these two are the closest in tone. They both examine family life. They both have a social issue at the heart of the story, and they both are domestic suspense squarely in that genre. So yes, they have the stories are different, the characters are different, the settings are very different. The Dangers of an Ordinary Night takes place mostly in Boston, in a city. So yes, the settings and all are different, but yes, they have the same tone, the same vibe.
And then do you have advice, do either of us have advice to offer aspiring writers? And this is Happy National Novel Writing Month. I'm sorry, for me, when I see National Writing Novel Month, I love you, whoever can do a novel in a month. It is so against like my way of working. I can't even imagine ever doing it. If it works for people, more power to you. So I'm not saying that in any judgment, but I just almost feel afraid when I hear about National Writing Month. Write a novel in 30 days. I can't even imagine. But
Yeah.
what's your reaction to it, Lynne?
Yeah, I can't imagine it either. Well, the only way that I could look at it that it would make sense to me is if somebody were going to dedicate every day sometime every day to the novel that they're working on. And they were
Yes.
going to say sort of like, for 30 days I'm going to pay attention to my lovely novel, right? That would make more sense to me. But to actually think that one could have the expectation of completing one in any substantive way, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know how that would happen.
I couldn't do it. I know. Do you have a favorite place to write? Because I have a couple for myself, 3 places that I love in particular. But or you sit at a desk like a grown-up woman and
I
work?
do. I sit right here.
You do? Oh, wow, look at you. I love to write a few places. I grew up in a very tiny house with 4 kids. My grandfather, dogs, cats, fish, birds. And there was one bathroom, and my mother had TVs in every room. It was chaos all the time. The only quiet place to go to read was the bathtub. So I got very used to the bathtub being my comfort spot. So I know I'm tempting fate. I bring my laptop in the bathtub sometimes at work, even though I have a very calm existence right now. We have our dog, just Thomas and me. I don't need to do that. I also love, because as a kid, I used to go to the library all the time. I kind of hid in the library because I was not very athletic, kind of a bully. And so I would go to the library. So to this day, I just love to go hide in a library and just soak in the quiet and work. And then I also weirdly love to write on airplanes. I find airplanes, I don't know, like, even though there's people everywhere and a lot of annoying people a lot often, I don't know, I just can you're up above the world, and I just kind of, I don't know, the writing comes easily there. Any of those places tempt you? No.
No, I'm really just sit at the desk person.
You
It's
are.
like I have all my little creature comforts around me, and it's a little bit of a space that I've carved out in my home. My children don't live here anymore, but when they did, I felt like my life was kind of chaos too. And I used to tell them that when I would come in here, I was not available. And my son was the one that would always be like coming in anyway. And I'd say, if I was driving to Boston, you wouldn't be able to come in here and ask me for a peanut butter sandwich or a glass of milk. So just pretend, I'm in Boston. So for the longest time, he called my office Boston. He'd say, "Are you going to Boston?" And I'd be like, "I'm in Boston."
Leave me alone. I'm in Boston. You know what's funny is in the book, Lena, her son sneaks into her office when she's gone early in the book, and it's kind of snooping around for some information. So it's interesting that there's that.
Yes, my son probably did that too.
He did. Oh, probably not looking for such dark information.
Well,
but I don't know.
That I don't have. The darkest part of my life is in the story.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything I didn't ask, Lynn, that you would say, like, oh, there's something I really want people to know about this book? Because it's a fabulous read, and people are, who pick it up will be treated to a great escape, but also a thought-provoking read and wonderful characters. But is there any part of it or element that, because I'm also careful, I don't want to give things away. I know I gave away little bits and pieces, but is there anything that I haven't asked that you would love to just tell people about it?
Yeah, I think that the only thing that I would say is that it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, that I'm comfortable exploring these heavy topics in a novel that allows characters to explore what they think, what they feel, the choices they've made. But at the end of the day, I still feel like my stories, and this one in particular, lands on hope, right? Lands on the idea that we can reveal ourselves, our true selves, to other people, and pulling those things into the light makes a difference, right? So I hope that as intense as a white water ride as it might feel, that it lands on hope.
Have you ever gone whitewater rafting ever, by the way?
I have not.
You have not? Okay. I think we should do a book club, Lynn. A book club, a floating book club on a whitewater river raft. I think that's what you have to do.
I'm there.
And we'll put it on YouTube. It'll go viral. Especially when I fall off.
and then we'll go to a movie theater, a drive-in.
Yeah, exactly. And hope no one comes after us. Michelle says, I love these conversations. So interesting how both authors are inspired. Thank you. Thank you, Michelle, for tuning in. And I think that was just a really wonderful way to put it, Lynn, about, ending on a message of hope, because I do the same. And especially in Her Last Affair, it's like, it's pretty dark and twisted. And at the very last minute, an unexpected twist, literally on the last page, there's something that turns. And it's very hopeful, and there's a sweetness to it. And I had the idea in my head the whole time I was writing it, to have that little last minute twist. And I thought, can I pull it off? Can I pull it off? And then when I wrote it, you have that feeling. So often as a writer, I have the feeling of like, oh God, I hope I can do this. But then once in a while, you have that wonderful feeling of like, wait, I did this and it worked. And that's how I felt for me. Yes. And do you have that sometimes where you get to the last page and you feel
I totally do. And I feel like that ending on hope is, what are we in this world for if not to figure these things out and land on hope, right? And I do think you really pulled it off, because I thought that was the perfect ending for all the dark twists and turns, that it mattered that it landed there on that. It did.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's just so nice chatting with you, because I've known you on social media, I feel like, for a very long time, but now I feel like I know you better. So, social media is wonderful. And that's one of the wonderful things, is connecting with other writers, connecting with readers, connecting with book clubs. Your social media is Lynn. It's your full name though, right? What is it? It's Lynn.
It's so on Instagram. On Instagram, it's Lynn Reeves Griffin. Yeah. And my website is Lynn Griffin. So it's a little bit confusing, but maybe we'll have Robert throw those in the the show
All
notes.
right, and mine is just at John Searles, my name. So I love hearing from people, and it's just I'm happy to chat with you about your book, and congratulations. It's Dark Rivers to Cross, everybody.
Thank you.
Lynne
Thank you
Reeves.
so
It's a
much.
wonderful book and a wonderful chat. So thank you, and thank you to Robert, and thank you to everybody for tuning in and asking such great questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Bye-bye.
you, Lynn. Thank you, John. Wonderful job as expected. Folks watching live, I'll look for an email tomorrow with this recording, as well as information on where you can purchase Lynn's latest book, Dark Rivers to Cross, as well as John's latest book, Her Last Affair. I want to thank the Book Oasis and Stodom for providing the copies. So thank you all so much, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Bye. Good night. Good night.